Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom is back and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives and another episode of overrated, rightly rated, or underrated. And obviously in this series, you guys know how it is. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on whether or not each car in every RQ in the legendary rarity is either overrated, underrated, or rightly rated. And obviously there is a extra severely overrated for cars that I truly think deserve that hot garbage tag. So without further ado, like I said, I cannot stress this enough, but this is my personal opinion. But I do own a good fair share of these cars. I have used them and I know how they perform or how little I use them because they underperform. So once again, I'm just sharing with you my personal opinion on whether each legendary is underrated, rightly rated, or overrated. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be covering cars from RQ84 to RQ85, and then obviously the next episode will do 86 to 87. So let us begin with the aerials. Now, the aerials, we've already talked about this in the past in my special edition series when we were talking about every single British legendary. So I'm just going to say about the same things over here. These two aerials are definitely overrated and the Atom 4 is rightly rated. I think the Atom 4 and the Donkavort D8 GTO, they kind of operate in the same location and they're kind of 50-50 as well. So real quick, I'm going to show you this little chart over here and just pay attention to the bottom section, right? With the Donkavort and the aerial, we'll talk about the other cars later, but when I put both of these cars on a 1-1-1 basis, as you can see, they are pretty much like, the pioneers for the Twisty collection when it comes to RQ84s. But then granted, most of these other cars are considered as hybrids. I guess the only one is maybe the Viper ACR. The Viper ACR is an interesting one because it's kind of like half super twisty but also half hybrid, because the MRA of the Viper ACR is strong. I think it's in the 90s as well, 95.52, which is, a lot higher than the Donkavort and the Atom. So I kind of feel like I shouldn't put the ACR with the GTO and the Atom 4. And as you can see over here, it's kind of 50-50, right? GTO wins hairpin, wins karting, wins twisty circuit, twisty road, and obviously the aerial wins car park, G4 slalom, yada yada yada. So I think these two cars are very competitive. They definitely, are worth staying in their RQ. I don't really have any issues with them, so both of them are rightly rated in my opinion. Now, next up is the Aston Martin 177. Now, the Aston Martin 177 is a pretty interesting one because it's a great dragster in a sense where it has really good MRA, right? It's got 109 MRA, and once again, if I bring this sheet back, you can see that the 177 does actually stand out in the fast circuit. In particular, it's really good on the 1 mile, even beating some of the other cars that are known for being dragsters like the Pagani Zonda F, as well as, well, that's the only one really. I didn't put it up against any of the other dragsters, but if I were to put it up against, well, let's see, 86 would be a little bit too high, but maybe if I put it up against, for example, an 85 rated Pagani, let's see how it actually bests the 85 Pagani Tricolor as well. So personally, I think that the Aston Martin 177, it's a tough one. I think it is an underrated car in terms of the drag. It definitely hits above its weight for the drag, but at the same time, it's kind of balanced out because it is one of the weakest performing twisty cars. Like, this is like almost like a borderline dragster, because it's just so far below its class compared to a Dodge Viper TA or a Porsche 911 GT3. It's a tough one. The 177 is really like, I think it's underrated. I can see it as an 85, but if it is an 85, it is solely seen as a dragster, which is a little bit underwhelming when this car has 92 handling stock. The only issue is that the 0 to 60 base of the 177 is very weak. So that's the main thing about it, but it's got decent handling, but that isn't translating too much into its times because it is still losing to cars like the Cayman GT4, 911 GT3. I mean, when you think about it, the Cayman GT4, where is the Cayman? Yeah, I mean, it's the same handling, right? Both are 92, but the 0 to 60 difference is 0.3 seconds. That being said, though, the 177 is a bit of a specialist. I think it's slightly underrated. I can see it as an 85 for the exact same reason why I can see the Demon as an 86. The thing is, the Demon is a ridiculously strong car. There is no car within its RQ neighborhood, as Hutch likes to call it. I usually call it, RQ range, but Hutch calls it RQ neighborhood, which, there is a catch to it, which I think is pretty interesting. There is no car that is like the Demon. There is no car that has that 0 to 60, but also has that handling. The Demon is basically like a car that knows what it wants to be on steroids, and I can see it at an 86. I can see it at an 87. It is a very, very strong car, especially if you can max it out 1.8 for a 0 to 60. I mean, this is a car that I still use all the time, and I genuinely think that it's underrated. So I feel like the 177 could go up to 85, and then with that said, the Demon can actually go up to 86. So both of these cars I think are underrated. 177 ever slightly so. The Porsche 718 Cayman is, I think, rightly rated. When you look at the times, the 718 Cayman is not the worst in its class, it's not the best in its class, it's mostly second place, third place. I think it kind of is the embodiment of what makes an RQ84 hybrid performance car. So yeah, very, very strong, cool car indeed. Okay. Next up, the Audi A8 W12 is severely overrated. I do not care what you say about the 0 to 60 and the MRA being slightly decent. It's still a piece of crap, because if I really wanted a drag standard tire car, I would go with the Cadillac 16, which I think is underrated. Now, this car used to be 87 at one point. It used to be 86 at one point. Now it's 85. The thing about the Cadillac 16 is that you can put this car at basically almost any RQ, and it would be not contested. It'll be uncontested, because there is nothing like the 16. There is nothing like a rear-wheel drive standard tires, low 0 to 60, high top speed kind of standard tire beast dragster, you know what I mean? There's nothing like the 16. You can put this at 89, and honestly, no one could really argue with that, because there is nothing to compare the 16 to. The 16 is the best in its niche, the best in its class, and it's been that way since American Dream. Not even American Frontier, American Dream, that's how old it is. It's a fantastic car, and genuinely I don't see why it went down to 85. I think it was a great car at 86, and I think it should go back up there. It's just, once again, you know, it's kind of subjective to give it an RQ number. There isn't anything to compare the 16 to, so once again, if you put it in an 88, okay, sure, that is your benchmark for drag standard tire cars. That's an 88. The thing is, the 16 is the benchmark. So whatever RQ the 16 is going to be the benchmark. It's going to set the precedence for every other rear-wheel drive standard tire car that's below it, which are the Maybachs mostly. But yeah, once again, I think the 16 is just underrated. It could pass off as an 86, 87, no questions there. Next up is the Audi R8 5.2, 87 handling, 3.7 for 0 to 60. It's overrated for sure. I don't think it's severely overrated like the Lamborghinis are, but it definitely isn't a strong car, not a car that I would be proud of, to be honest. So I'm gonna put it in overrated. Next up is the Bentley Continental GTR. Now, the Bentley Continental GTR is a car that I genuinely want to like, but it's not very good. The thing is, though, the Bentley Continental GTR isn't the worst car of the bunch, and genuinely, I would put it in rightly rated. I think it's okay, mainly because it kind of has that right balance for an RQ84 of a low 0 to 60, but decent handling as well. You compare it directly with the Audi R8, there's a 0.3 second difference, and only a 1 handling difference between both cars. I personally think that the Continental is just slightly better. It is a relatively strong car on like the 0 to 100. 82 MRA isn't strong though. I don't know. I'm looking at the times with this car, and I'll be honest, like, I want to like it. I mean, the Bentley Continental actually beats the RQ86 Gallardo on the fast circuit. So I can show you the times right here actually. So if you look at this, right, the Continental, 1 minute 4 seconds and 0.8 milliseconds is actually 0.03 milliseconds faster than the Lamborghini Gallardo, and the Gallardo is 2 RQ higher. So yeah, I want to like the Continental GTR. I think it's pretty good. Obviously, there are a lot of times in the red, but then again, I'm mostly comparing this car to 85s, and I'll get to the Nissan in a bit. I think the Nissan is actually a little bit underrated. But yeah, I'm gonna put the Bentley Continental GT3 in rightly rated. I think it's okay where it's at. Next up is the BMW M850i X-Drive, and this one, once again, I think is rightly rated. Just a slightly better version of the Continental in terms of everything besides top speed, and rightly so, because the M850i is also higher in RQ at 85 to the Bentley's 84. That makes sense, no questions about it. Now, next one is a car that I genuinely despise, and that's the Bugatti EB110 GT. I hate this car because it's just ridiculously ugly, but there is no denying that it actually is quite decent. It's pretty competent on Car Park G4's hairpin, and it is a very good car on the karting circuit as well. So as much as I hate the car, I think it actually is rightly rated. Next up is Hollywood, my Viper ACR, obviously. Now, this is a car that I love to death. You guys know this already. And as you can see over here, when I compare it to the big boys, or maybe, you know, cars within its class, the Viper ACR remains the best car for the twisty circuit and the car park. It genuinely is a strong showing, and I think it is one of the stronger 84s. Is it enough for me to think it's underrated? I don't think so. I think the only car here that you'll see is underrated would be this RQ84-911 GT3. Now, this being the best car for the G-Force, the indoor karting, karting circuit, slalom, and twisty road, that is very, very impressive. This is 3096 compared to the Viper ACR's 3297. Obviously, the Viper ACR is better in the MRA department, from the Porsche's 84 to the Viper ACR's 95, but that 0 to 60 difference is night and day between the two cars. That being said, the ACR is still very, very strong, and I think it's a very strong RQ84, but I think it's rightly rated. It shouldn't be any higher. Now, what isn't rightly rated, in my opinion, is the TA. The TA Syracuse should be overrated. I think it should be an 83. I don't see any world where the Viper TA is the same RQ as the Dodge Viper ACR. Once again, Hollywood, my ACR beats the TA on the car park, on the G-Force, on the hairpin, on the indoor karting, on the karting circuit, on the slalom, on the twisty circuit, on the twisty road, basically everywhere. It even beats the TA on I want to say fast circuit. Yes, fast circuit and fast circuit rolling. So where it's relevant, hybrid tracks and twisty tracks, the ACR is just car for car better than the TA. So it makes no sense that both of them are 84. I think that the ACR should be an 84, the TA should be an 83. Now, moving on is the Koenigsegg CCR. Now, the Koenigsegg CCR, it's a bit of a sad story, this one. It definitely is overrated. I think the only reason why it is an 85 is because it has that outstanding top speed. 242 is a lot higher than a lot of other cars within its RQ neighborhood. Thank you, Siri. I don't know why Siri always thinks I'm talking to her. Maybe she's lonely. I don't know. I wear her every day. Come on. But anyway, yeah, the CCR is just severely... yeah, I mean, genuinely, I think it's severely overrated. This is a car that I have owned in my garage for about 3, if not over 3 years, and it's just rusting. It's collecting dust. The CCR does not deserve an 85 RQ stat. It definitely should be 83. When you think about it, if I want to use a dragster, yeah, it'll be a great car for the test bowl, and that's it. You know, I would rather use a Demon, and honestly, on the longer drags, on the 1 mile, the Aston Martin 177. Okay, so yeah, the Koenigsegg CCR, a little bit of a disappointment. Now, next up is the Koenigsegg CCX. Now, the Koenigsegg CCX, if I remember correctly, has slightly better MRA, so it's a bit, you know, more respectable. So I'm gonna get the times out over here. Now, the MRA times for the Koenigsegg CCR, the yellow boy, has an MRA of 82, which is very, very weak for a Koenigsegg. But at least for the CCX, it's a little bit more respectable of 93. So still, I think the CCX is actually overrated, to be honest. It's not severely overrated, because the CCX is only slightly better than the CCR, but it isn't really a good dragster. Let me show you the times right here once again, right? So we have the Koenigseggs at the bottom, and as you can see, these cars are literally known for just going fast and having high top speeds, but they still falter compared to cars like the Roof RT35 and the McLaren F1. So it is a little disappointing, and as you can see, even the 0 to 100 times, or the 1 mile times, they still cannot kind of hold a candle to the Pagani Zonda Cinque Roadster, the Roof CTR3, or even the McLaren F1 GT. So very underwhelming numbers from the Koenigseggs, and I think they should go down in RQ. Alright, now moving on to the Lamborghinis. Alright, first of all, the Murcielago definitely is severely overrated. That thing is a hot garbage. But the two that I do want to shout out are these two, the Murcielago and the Gallardo. So, when you look at the times over here, the Murcielago and the Gallardo, they actually kind of carry their weight. The Gallardo LP560-4 is the best option for the indoor karting and the karting circuit and twisty road. And the Murcielago LP640 is actually the best option for the hairpin road, and it's respectable everywhere else. So, as much as I like to crap on these Lamborghinis, much like the Bugatti EB110, I think that these two cars are actually rightly rated for RQ85s. So, you know, the Bugatti 3386 and the Murcielago 3286 at 1 RQ more, it kind of actually makes sense. So, yes, these three cars, I mean, they still don't look very good, but within their niche of this four-wheel drive category, they aren't too bad. I think they actually are surprisingly rightly rated. Now, next up is the Lancia Monte Carlo Turbo, and I think that this car actually is severely overrated. The thing about the Lancia Monte Carlo Turbo is that it's kind of known for two things. It's very light, and the MRA is very good. But, you know, there's always something, a negative, to counteract the positives. Example, Lancia, right? Everyone says it has a really good MRA. That's true, but it has no top speed. Second thing, Lancia Monte Carlo, very light. That's good, but the 0 to 60 is garbage. Once again, I'm going to show you the times right here, and as you can see, the Lancia Monte Carlo, especially in the drags, what it's known for with that MRA, actually is one of the worst cars available here. And it doesn't get much better with the twisty stuff as well. It is crap on the hairpin road. It's not very strong on the twisty circuit and the twisty road. I personally think that the Monte Carlo Turbo is actually severely overrated. That should be 83 or a low 84. It should not be an 85. Next up is the Emera GT4 and the Evora GX. Now the Evora GX I think is rightly rated as an 85. The Emera I think is this is a tough one because the Evora GX is actually better than the Emera GT4, and personally I think that the Emera GT4 could actually be a little overrated. I think it would be a really good 84. It is a slightly weaker 85. I think it's kind of in between overrated and rightly rated. It's more competitive to the Viper ACR than it is to the Evora GX, and the Viper ACR I think is a rightly rated 84, Evora rightly rated 85. So I think that the Emera is more 84 than 85, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna put it in overrated, but just slightly overrated. The McLaren 12C is rightly rated in my opinion. Main reason being the 0 to 60 is ridiculously low. I've talked about that car recently, so I'm not going to get in too much detail with that. Same with all of the McLarens. I think that all of these McLarens are actually all rightly rated, aside from the McLaren F1, which I think is actually underrated. We saw the drag times of the McLaren F1. It is the best car for the test bowl, even compared with other RQ86s. It is the best car for the 0 to 170, 0 to 150, and the 1 mile. This is a long-range dragster, and it's very good at doing so. And on the topic of dragsters, I also want to cover the Roof RT35. I think these two cars are underrated. Both of them 85 are the best in class, and I think both of them can go up as 86s. If they stay at 85, they're just going to be great, or you know, decent bargains at least, because they definitely hit above their weights. These are dragsters that are capable of beating RQ86 dragsters like the Alfa Romeo TZ3 Corsa, the Roof CTR3, the Pagani Zonda Cinque Roadster, and the McLaren F1 GT as well. So all of those cars are very, very strong. Next up, the Morgan Aero 8 race car. Now this is a car that I don't know too much of. I'm just going to put it in rightly rated. I mean, we all recently won it, and it's all going to be in our garages collecting dust. The main thing I can say about the Aero race car is that it combines a very good combination of a low 0 to 60 and decent handling. So for that, I'll give it rightly rated. Now, next up is the Nissan Skyline GTR. Now this is an interesting one because the Nissan Skyline GTR is pretty impressive, I would say. It is the best car, especially compared to 85s as well, on the car park of the G-Force, and it is relatively strong throughout the twisty conditions as well. And I think the main thing being, it actually has a good balance of a low 0 to 60 and decent handling for an RQ84. That being said though, I think it's in a good place. I don't think it's overrated. I'm going to put it in rightly rated. I think that the four-wheel drives here are actually in a pretty decent place, so I'm going to put it in rightly rated as well. Now, next up are the Paganis. So the Paganis, pretty interesting. They aren't as impressive as I thought they were going to be. Actually, they, even though they have really good MRA numbers, they don't seem to be, keeping up to cars like the Roof RT35, for example, or even the McLaren. So it's a pretty tough one. Actually, I just realized I do have the Morgan times on this spreadsheet. Yeah, it's not too bad. I don't mind keeping it rightly rated. But once again, the Paganis, they seem to be treading water almost. They're kind of sitting in this situation where I think they're just barely rightly rated or slightly overrated. The thing about the Paganis is that they're not amazing twisty cars, right? 91 handling, 90 handling. It's not like the 92 handlings of, you know, the Vipers and the Porsches and all that kind of stuff. But they have really good MRA. But their 0 to 60s, especially for the Zonda F, you know, is not as low as cars like the Roof RT35, which really is the king of the crop. So I had to really think long and hard about these ones, and I genuinely came to think that basically the Pagani's on the F, Club Sport, as well as the Pagani's on the Roadster F are all actually a little overrated. I can see them all at 83, 84 respectively. The Chunke I think is rightly rated. This one's just slightly more of a better hybrid, as well as the Tricolor. So I think those two cars are rightly rated. But the Zondas, unfortunately, the Zonda Fs and the F Club Sport, you know, the ones that I put in overrated, they kind of speak for themselves. They're just a little bit underrated in my opinion. Overrated in my opinion. Now, next up is the Porsche 911 Carrera 4 3.0 GT2. Now, this Porsche, there's not a lot of times for this on Top Drive's records yet, but it does look relatively impressive because with the 3 times that are on record, the Porsche Carrera 4 already has the best twisty circuit time, beating cars like the Volkswagen Synchro, the Skyline, the M850, the Murcielagos, the Bentleys. Obviously, the competition isn't too high, but it looks promising. So I'm gonna give it and rightly rates it 4 now. There are not a lot of times for that Porsche. Next up is the 911 GT2 RS, and I'm gonna put this in overrated, and it hurts. It really hurts me to put the 911 GT2 RS in the overrated category because I love this car. I love it so damn much. I even have it maxed out. It was one of my first ever legendaries, and it's got great MRA. The only issue is it is kind of not keeping up as an 84, okay? 3491, you compare it to the Viper ACR, 3494. You compare it to the Porsche 718 came on, 3.292. Unfortunately, the Porsche 911 GT2 cannot hold a candle to other 84s, and I think that it should move down to an 83 where it will be a little bit more relevant. I love that car, trust me, and it hurts for me to put it in the overrated category, but it is what it is. Next up is the Porsche 911 GT3 992. Now, this car is definitely underrated. It is fantastic. I've already showed you the times on Top Drive's records, and it is the best car within its RQ neighborhood on the G-Force test, indoor karting circuit, slalom, twisty road. It is ridiculous, okay? And I can see it as an 85, where the Porsche 718 remains as an 84. I think the hierarchy of things would make more sense that way. Next up is the Porsche GT3 RS, and I believe that this remains as a, you know, rightly rated car, mainly because the Porsche 911 GT3 992 has slightly better MRA compared to the 911 GT3 RS. So, and I believe that's a 991. So, yeah, I think it makes sense. Both of those cars should be both 85. I think that is a lot more balanced. Now, next up is the Porsche 959 Dakar. Now, the Dakar is an interesting one because it's very similar to the Cadillac 16, where you can kind of just give it its own RQ. There isn't many motorsport four-wheel drive off-road tire cars with a low 0 to 60 and it has the X factor, or the X factor that the 959 Dakar carries, which is high ground clearance. So much like the 16, there aren't a lot of cars to compete with the Dakar in this niche. You can put it at any RQ and that will be the benchmark. Now, fun fact, back in the day, 959 Dakar was 86 RQ. Now, 86 maybe is a little bit too high, but 84 I think is a little bit too low. 85 would be a good place to put it. Next up is the Porsche Carrera GT. Not much to say about this. I think it's just rightly rated as an 84. It basically is a drag version of the Viper ACR. It's got strong MRA, but the handling is a little bit weaker. The 0 to 60 is a little bit weaker, but the top speed is a little bit higher. So I think as an 84, it's all right. Now, next up, and once again, you compare it directly with the Zonda F. These two cars have very similar MRA, but the Carrera has the same 0 to 60, slightly lower top speed, but 2 more handling, which is huge in comparison. Next up are the Porsches. Now, the first one is the Cayenne Turbo. I think is slightly overrated. The thing about the Cayenne Turbo is that the handling is garbage. That being said, though, the Macan Turbo is a lot better, and I think it's rightly rated. The handling is just a lot better, and handling is everything when it comes to the off-road meta. Now, next up is the Porsche Panamera 4S Hybrid. Now, the handling on this car is genuinely just very, very weak. I think it's overrated. I think the Panamera Turbo is overrated as well. Once again, the stats on these Panameras leave little to be desired. The main thing that makes them useful is A, estate, B, medium ground clearance, and C, 4-wheel drive. So those are the real, pulling factors of what makes these cars a little bit more special. But I feel like they are better at an 83. I think 84 is a little bit too high, mainly because the handling for both of these cars are very weak, and the 0 to 60s as well. Actually, I cannot confirm if this car is even medium. It might even be low. That being said, that will be even more disappointing. Next up is the Rezvani Beast. Now, the Rezvani Beast, we don't know too much about this car. I barely see it. The main thing about it is it's a weird one because it's like a quarter mile, half mile specialist, but once you get to a 1 mile, it's pretty useless because the top speed is only slightly higher than a regular ultra German car at 155 limited. So 160 is very, very depressing. The Rezvani Beast is an interesting one, I'll be honest, like maybe rightly rated or borderline overrated. I'm actually gonna put in overrated because 86 handling is garbage. The main thing about the Rezvani is a very interesting car. It's a quarter mile, half mile only. That's it. But if I wanted to use a quarter mile, half mile only car, I'd rather just use one RQ more and use the Demon. And more so, the Demon will beat the Rezvani by more than 50 points. So I think I'm gonna put it in overrated. Next up is the Subaru Legacy B4 GT300. I think that this is going to be rightly rated. I think it's a very good AC4, has a saloon tag, handles very well, MRA isn't very strong, and the 0 to 60 is not very strong either. That being said, the handling is very good and it has those niches. Last two are going to be the Volkswagens, and these two are hot garbage. I'm gonna be honest with you. The Golf R400 is hot garbage. The Synchro as well, just absolutely garbage. To be fair though, the Synchro is very, very light. It is decent on the slalom. The thing about the Synchro is that it's a high risk, high reward car. Yes, it is the best car for the slalom, but it's the worst car in many situations. So I'll show you this over here, right? Yes, it's the best car for the slalom, but it's the absolute worst car for the karting. It's the absolute worst car for the twisty circuit. It's the absolute worst car for the twisty road. So you can say that the Synchro is a specialist for one track and one track only. And as you can see, the Volkswagen is just garbage across the board. So is it mean of me to put it in severely overrated considering that the Synchro is the best at just one track? Maybe it could be overrated, but I hate Volkswagen, so I'm gonna put it in severely overrated. And the one thing that the Volkswagen has that the Murcielagos don't have, or one thing that the Murcielagos have that the Volkswagen doesn't have, is that the Murcielagos, they have, the best in some track sets, and then they're not the worst in others, which makes them rightly rated in my eyes. Unlike the Volkswagen, yes, is the best in one track set, but is the absolute worst in 4 track sets. Like, that is just depressing stats. So I don't know. And at the end of the day, if you want to use a slalom car that's lightweight, why use a Synchro when you can use a super light or an Aerial Atom 4 or a Donkavort GTO, which are also cheaper cars, because both of these that I mentioned are 84, super light is 82. So I think with that being said, the W12 Synchro definitely is severely overrated as well. But anyway, guys, that is going to be my assessment for RQ84 to RQ85s. Let me know if you agree with my underrated, rightly rated, and overrated choices, and let me know what you're looking forward to for the next episode, which is going to be covering 86 to 87. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac, hold tight all